So welcome to the Automate High Volume Routine Service Requests with integrationHub and Flow Designer webinar. I'm Patrick Boschman. I lead IT Workflow Solution Consulting. I'm joined by David Deitch and Will Hallam. They are both advisory solution consultants on the IT Workflow Solution Consulting team. They'll do a little bit of a deeper introduction when they present. So we're gonna do some introductions and some housekeepings. Patrick, I lead IT Workflow Solution Consulting for Commercial America. Previous to ServiceNow, I actually was a customer, and I have a great deal of hands-on experience working in what was then orchestration, so our older automation technology and workflow. And I have a good bit of experience with an integrationHub and Flow Designer as well. Just a couple housekeeping measures. If you could use, when you have a question, please share them with us. But if you could use the Q&A feature of the Zoom webinar, that would be greatly appreciated. Whoever isn't speaking will keep their eye on the Q&A feature, and we'll try to get your questions answered. And if there's something super relevant to the discussion, we'll actually pause the speakers and have them answer the question, or one of the other team members on the call will answer the question for you, and then we'll do a broader Q&A session at the end. I'm going to talk briefly on automation value. Then I'm going to pass it over to David and Will, where they're going to talk about some of the capabilities of integrationHub and Flow Designer, as well as a live demonstration. And then, as I said, we will do a live Q&A session towards the end. And if you want to come off mute and ask your question live, we can do that as well. So quick safe harbor slide to appease the lawyers on the call. We will be sharing a roadmap today. Please don't make any purchasing decisions based off of the content contained in this presentation. So a couple of brief slides on automation. I read an interesting article the other day by Gartner, and they kind of talked about their automation predictions for 2021. And there were several. There was probably about 10 of them. I pulled out a few of them just to share on this call today. So the first one is, by 2023, 40% of all enterprise workloads will be deployed in the cloud infrastructure and on platform services, up from just 20% in 2020. And what this means to me is we're just going to have to build a ton of automation and a lot of frameworks to handle these workloads that are ephemeral in nature. They spin up and they spin down. They're changing very rapidly. Even things like automating change control for those workloads is going to become extremely important as we scale up through 2023 in this cloud computing revolution. So through 2024, enhancements in analytics and automatic remediation capabilities will refocus 30% of what IT ops is doing today from support to continuous engineering. So we're going to shift, 30% of that workforce from, firefighting IT issues, dealing with alerts, dealing with incidents, to building infrastructure that repairs itself, or when an issue does arise, it automatically remediates within the environment. And then the last one on AI ops, by 2025, 50% of enterprises will have devised an artificial intelligence orchestration platform to operationalize IT from fewer than 10% in 2020. So AI ops is here. It's real now. So obviously any sort of automation that we can build to help, do the remediation aspects of, an AI ops initiative within the environment will be greatly received by any organization. So a couple customer stories, and actually one of our stories, right? So ServiceNow has a program called Now on Now. So everything that you consume as a customer of ServiceNow or a prospective customer of ServiceNow, we consume internally here. So as an employee, right, when I need to reset my password, I don't call the IT service desk. I go to a password reset portal that runs on the ServiceNow platform. Any sort of employee onboarding or offboarding, being a hiring manager, I interact with those systems frequently. All of that is handled through the ServiceNow platform. So we've, automated over 1 million hours, actually 1,100,021. I think this slide's a little bit old, so that number is probably even higher. Now, what we talk to our customers a lot about is, how do I get started with this automation initiative, or how do I discover where I can automate things within my environment? And ServiceNow has part of its capabilities within predictive intelligence actually allows us to identify automation opportunities within your subset of ticket data. So it looks at your incidents, your problems, and your requests, and it flags things that you could potentially be leveraging integrationHub or virtual agent, or the combination of both integrationHub and virtual agent for self-service remediation or self-service fulfillment of these tasks, things like client software distribution, password resets. So just know that if you are using ServiceNow today, all of this data that's contained within ServiceNow around your tickets, you can analyze with this automation discovery tool. This is also available if you don't, maybe you don't subscribe to predictive intelligence within your environment. You can actually even clone down to your sub-production environment and leverage this capability to build maybe a business case around an automation initiative. So all of this customer data, right, and all of these automation discovery activities led us to realize that there's really 5 requests that are draining your IT help desk's productivity. Things like password resets, user unlocks, access management, software requests. I need Visio on my laptop. And then other VDI and connectivity type issues. And I think that's especially important with this COVID hybrid work environment that we're currently in. So these are all things that we have out of the box automation and out of the box spokes to integrate with leading tools such as Active Directory to actually automate within your environment. And we're going to show you some of that today. Oh, forgot to build the slide. Those are the leading tools. So another way to look at this data, right, and maybe build a use case for some sort of automation center of excellence, right? So this is based off of a rather large organization, 10,000 employees, a 60% success rate based off the automation, but you can see some of the value that you can actually drive from just automating service requests or automating incident response, right? $12 million in automating just file share modifications. And that's usually as simple as just adding somebody to a group in Active Directory or removing them from that group. Software provisioning. Now that $1 million is just fulfilling those requests. But think about, leveraging your CMDB or a software asset management program where you can say, you know what, this person hasn't been using Visio in the last 6 months. I'm going to remove it from your laptop. Well, there's additional savings there as well through building that automation. And it also protects your license position with a company like Microsoft or even Oracle. So just another way to look at this data and produce a business case for building automation within your environment or some sort of automation center of excellence. Now, before we had the fancy automation discovery, this is something that we worked up with a customer back in actually the orchestration days, but this still lies true today. You can drastically decrease operational costs with automation. This is based off of a $69 an hour blended labor rate. So 60 IT processes, and I know it's an eye chart, but you can read them here. Things like restarting JVMs and unlocking AD accounts, employee onboarding, employee offboarding, Linux, Windows disk cleanup. So all these 60 processes were 65,000 requests a year, which was $2.2 million in operating expense for the specific IT organization. So there is another way to do this that doesn't necessarily, require ServiceNow ticket data, and that's what we did with this customer to build this business case. And with that, I will hand it off to David, and he's going to talk about some of the integrationHub capabilities and do a quick demo. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Patrick. My name is David Deitch. I am in IT workflows as a solution consultant. And little bit of my background. Before I came to ServiceNow almost 2 years ago, I was at a partner organization, professional services, managed services background, as well as some time at a very large school district as their enterprise communication network manager. So I come to ServiceNow as a practitioner in integrations and IT operations. So with the ServiceNow platform, when we talk about the capabilities of integrationHub, we can look at it like this pyramid. It's built on building blocks. And at the base, we have an action designer where you can create these integration steps with other tools using protocols like REST, SOAP, SSH, PowerShell, whatever you need. Out of the box, I think we're up to almost 200 spokes, and we'll look at a list here in a second. These are specific integrations that we have written and keep maintained for you to do specific actions. And in the demonstration, we'll see how we can create a user in Azure Active Directory using an out-of-the-box action, or look them up, or add them to a group, or how we can send a text message using Twilio. Newer feature that we have is flow templates, where we've taken some of these common processes and given you a place to start building workflows for your organization. This is how it might look if you were to do this. And for our top use cases, like Patrick mentioned, password reset or Citrix session reset, will actually provide those out-of-the-box solutions, and you don't even have to build them from a flow template or put them together using the spokes. Out-of-the-box solutions include those password resets, Citrix, different flow template use cases, and 175 spokes. And if you want to see these, you can actually go to the ServiceNow store and type in spoke. First category that comes up will be the out-of-the-box apps and solutions, or the integration spokes. And if you want to view the whole list, just go ahead and click view more. And these are actually downloadable and installable into your instances from the store. This is the entire list, safe harbored at the beginning of the presentation, so a little bit forward-looking. But some of the common ones that we see use, Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, Teams integration is very popular, SCCM and Intune, Jamf, AWS, Azure, and all of these are providing great use cases in a lot of different organizations that are taking what used to be manual work or manual processes and just having them happen, providing a ton of value. Specifically, what we're going to look at today is an access management example. So we'll look at how we create a user and add them to a group in Azure AD, and how that can be developed from a flow template, if you'd like to. We'll quickly automate it, we'll eliminate errors, and we'll allow you to do higher priority, high value work in your organization. So without further ado, let's get to a demonstration. In today's demonstration, we're going to use a user, John Steele, in my demonstration instance. This could be a user that was put into Workday by your HR team and was pushed over through automation to ServiceNow. In the ServiceNow store, I've added the flow templates for access management so I can see an example of how this might look. And we're going to use the Azure AD user creation template today. And I have an instance of Azure AD. I'm going to go ahead and refresh it live. And we'll see that in my organization, we already have a John Steele and a John Steele 2 that exists today. So once I've downloaded that flow template, I can see one way that this might be done. You might create a service catalog item. First thing you'd want to do is if somebody's requesting a user ID, you want to make sure that doesn't exist. And if it does exist, in the template, we're actually closing the request and saying we can't do that right now. If not, we'll send it for approval. We'll go ahead and create the user, and we'll mark the task as complete. Now, I can't speak for everybody on the call in all the organizations. This is one way of doing something. But a lot of the time, to me, creating that AD user is actually part of a bigger onboarding process, and maybe not something requested out of the catalog. So even if that's the case in your organization, there's still a really good framework here to look up the user, go ahead, create the user, and take action based on that. So given that, I said, okay, what do I want to be my trigger in this example? Well, I'm going to say when a user updates from false to true, and because this is a sub-production testing instance, I've just added an extra piece to restrict it and not run it every time. I've also taken advantage of flow variables, and I've set these to be blank at the beginning of my flow. But I'm going to do the same thing that I saw in the flow template. I'm going to go ahead and look up that user ID. If I find that user ID already exists, I'm just going to go ahead and reset the flow variables and try again within the framework of the flow I've created. I don't have to necessarily close the case or the ticket. That said, your organization may not just append a number. So from the template, it's just one idea to send it back to the requester. If I've done this correctly, I found that the user doesn't exist. I can go ahead and create the user. I'll go ahead and look up the group. And this is based on the department that I've selected the user with. And I'll go ahead and add the user to the group real quick. I'll also update my ServiceNow record with the new user ID and the email address that I've officially assigned them now that I've coordinated with my system of record here, Azure Active Directory. I said something to get myself out of this in case I ended in a loop for some reason. And the last thing I want to do, I now have a request to notify somebody. So what if I want to tell John, hey, I've done this for you, John. It's hard for me to send him an email because I just created his email address, but maybe I could send him a text message. So I'm going to go ahead and add a step integrated with a Twilio account. And I'm going to go ahead and send an SMS. My from number, I'm just going to grab from a flow I already have. So number I have registered as a demo account in Twilio. Come on. And I may or may not know John's number, and I want this to be usable and generic. So I'm going to go grab John's mobile phone number from the record I just looked up. Hi, John. Welcome to Deitch Holdings. Your new email address is, and I can just go ahead and actually copy and paste what I wrote his email address as in a previous step. Can go ahead and hit done and save. I'm going to go ahead and come out of full screen here and bring over my iPhone. And what I'm going to do now is go ahead and test this flow that I just created or amended. Created this for John Steele, and I know that's my test record. So I'll go ahead and select him, and I'll hit run test. Actually works pretty quickly with Azure Active Directory, probably within about 45 seconds to complete the process in total. Says that we finished.
It's a high pressure situation, David.
I know, right? And my phone did shut off, but I did get a text message. Hi, John, welcome to Deitch Holdings. Of course, if I could type the word email correct, it would have said email instead of wmail. And I can actually look at that execution as well if I need to troubleshoot. And if I go back to Azure Active Directory and hit refresh, we're going to see that it wasn't happy with me. And no matter how many times I test this in the morning, when I do it live, it's not going to work right away. It was the second refresh that it'll work on. So it completed in about 45 seconds. I was just over here too quickly. I'll take that. If I look at John Steele and I look at the groups he's in, I can see that I've automatically added him to that IT_all group. Test runs completed. I can see all my records. I can see the different iterations through that I looked up the user, had to increment the variables. And then when I finally didn't find John Steele 3, I was able to create the user that we saw in Azure AD. These actions for Azure AD come out of the box. So if I want to look at what's happening for create user, I've given it a lot of variables that have come over from my user table in that trigger record. Go ahead and make this a little bigger now. Those are the inputs. And we've written the script to create the payload from those inputs. Now, if these are exactly what you need, this works right away. And if you need to add an extra input, you can actually copy these actions and add that extra input record and use the framework of the out-of-the-box actions to swiftly get to what you need as opposed to starting from scratch. We quickly post it. We handle the error, get a status message, and put that back into our main flow and continue on. So I hope that demonstration showed how ServiceNow can enable these processes that today might be manual within your organization and really enable a way to automate and get your teams doing high value work instead of manual repeatable processes. With that, I'm going to go ahead and hand off to Will for the second part of today's demonstration.
Thank you, David. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Will Hallam. I'm a solution consultant in the ITOM space. I've been at ServiceNow since May, and before then, I spent 5.5 years working at a ServiceNow customer with a focus on automation, and really appreciated the legacy orchestration engine and now Flow Designer as an extremely powerful tool to rapidly bring to market automated solutions for repetitive IT tasks. So what I'm going to show is a few examples of leveraging various integration hub spokes to reach out of ServiceNow and work with various external services. So the first example I'm going to run through is a simple integration with Box. And so what I did to illustrate that was created a flow. And just a side note, one of the things I really enjoy about Flow Designer is the ability to annotate steps using this icon over here. It really provides a lot of utility in revisiting. And, as David showed when he went into one of the out-of-the-box actions and then showed how that could be modified or tailored to suit your specific needs, it makes code reuse a lot easier because I can share and collaborate with the team. And as long as I provided good annotation on all of my steps, it's very easy for them to understand what this piece of content does and then build on it further, use it to solve their own problems. So this flow is going to trigger off of a catalog request. Flows can trigger off a number of different things. It can be triggered whenever a specific type of record within your ServiceNow instance is updated or created or deleted. It can be triggered based on a time basis. If you have processes you need to execute on a regular schedule, that can be used as this initial trigger to launch the flow. So what this flow is going to do is it's going to take files that are attached to a catalog request and then store them in Box after creating a folder named after the requested item. So the first step in the flow is to retrieve all the attached files that are on the particular request that's been submitted. It then calls an out-of-the-box action which comes with our Box spoke to then reach into the Box account and create a folder. And then if I expand that, I see that it's going to apply the name based on the number from the requested item record. Then we'll go into some simple error handling. Again, this is tailorable to whatever type of exception handling is appropriate for your use case in your organization. In this case, I'm just checking the response from the action and saying if it is an error response, then I'll go and create a catalog task for someone to investigate the error and resolve the issue. Assuming the Box folder is created successfully, then we go into our second kind of main phase, which is looping through our attachment records on the request. And then for each attachment record that's found, we'll call this out of the box, no pun intended, Box upload file action, passing it the file name, the folder ID that was returned back from this step up here where we created the folder, and the attachment content. And again, we'll have some error checking here. So if any of the uploads get a return other than success, they'll create a catalog task to trigger an investigation into what went wrong. So now to see that in action, I'll kind of do a little before and after, just showing my Box account contents with various folders for previously submitted requested items. So again, this is a very simplistic example. So there's no actual kind of input being provided to this catalog item other than attaching some files to it, which I'll go ahead and do now. So now we can see my attachments are attached to the catalog item. I will now order it. And I'll click down into the requested item that gets generated. Again, you can see the attachments up at the top. And then for excellent visibility into where your request is, my request item includes the flow context related link, which then lets me dive right into that flow and see exactly where in the process it is for executing. And at the top, we can see the flow is completed. And again, very similar to David's example, all of the steps that are executed are enumerated in this flow operation page. And where there's a loop involved, you can click through the different iterations of the loop to see what the individual steps took as inputs. So for example, the third iteration of the loop, here's the attachment and the attachment name that was being uploaded. Then if I go back to my box page and refresh, should see a new folder for my new requested item, which see right here matches the number on my new record. And then drilling into that, I can see my 3 files. Tab here. So the second example that I'll show is an integration with the Jenkins CI/CD platform. And so breaking down the flow that I created to showcase that, again, we'll trigger that off a service catalog request. The first thing we'll do is we'll retrieve catalog variables from the order form. So if I go into that order form, the order form takes a single parameter, which is the name of the Jenkins project, which we want to build. And so that gets pulled out of the individual request via this first step. Then just to kind of highlight a few more of the out-of-the-box actions that we provide with the Jenkins spoke, I just threw a couple extra steps in here. The first one will just interrogate the Jenkins server to pull down the current version. And then the second one will make an API call into Jenkins that enumerates all the builds that have been performed. So the meat and potatoes of this flow start right here with step 4, which is kicking off a perform build action. And it's just going to pass in the name of the Jenkins project that was retrieved in this first step here to pull in the catalog variables from the order form. At that point, the flow will go into a loop where it will wait for 30 seconds, then pull down the build ID, which will also, this action, in addition to getting the build ID based on the QID that was returned from the perform build step. In addition to that, that build ID, it also pulls back whether the build is completed or not, which we then interrogate down on step 9. So we're basically saying, pull the build completed value from step 7. And if that's true, then that's what'll bail us out of the loop. And then kind of in the middle here, we're leveraging a flow variable, which is basically, that's the global variable space, namespace for a flow. And it's what lets you maintain state as you're iterating through loops, which is especially important with loops because each loop iteration has its own variable scope. So you can't interrogate without flow variables. There wouldn't have been a way to interrogate the individual results from each loop iteration. And that flow variable comes in handy a little farther down when we are going to check for the ultimate result of the build, was a successful build or not. This step uses, again, a recurring theme. This is an out-of-the-box action to retrieve console output for a given build. So we'll go ahead and do that. And then we'll call a scripted action, which will attach that output to the requested item. So this is an example of using our action designer to go as deep as you need to go into, we cover the whole spectrum, no code, low code, pro code. So there are going to be instances where you need to write JavaScript code to interact with your instance. And this is one of those examples where I assembled a custom action taking two inputs, my requested item record and the console output that was retrieved from Jenkins. I then feed that into a script step, which actually makes the native ServiceNow call to attach the contents as a text file. And then I'm passing the record ID for that attachment record within ServiceNow back into my main flow.
Hey, Will, we got a question on, can we use other languages? Languages other than JavaScript? I think that's a little bit of a two-parter. My thought would be you could potentially use it in some sort of like wrapping it in PowerShell or SSH, or maybe offloading it to the mid server, but I'll let you answer specifically to this use case.
Sure. And yeah, I think you're spot on, Patrick. There's a bunch of options. There are a few different ways to run scripts or executables in literally any language via the Flow engine. One would be the PowerShell or SSH, which allows you to run that on the server of your choice. Then there's also mid scripting capabilities where you store a script on a mid server and then invoke it via a standard action saying to execute the piece of code via the mid server of your choice. And then we've also got the ability via our fairly new host agent called the Agent Client Collector. There's a spoke for that, which allows you to execute commands on remote systems via that agent. The advantage to that is you don't have the overhead of managing credentials. So our standard process for running remote commands requires some kind of credential, an SSH key, or Windows credentials for PowerShell remoting.
Yeah. With
the agent, you get out of that level of complexity. So if you've got the agent in your environment, it streamlines and simplifies some of those actions. Actually, I have an example of that I can show.
Yeah, so David followed up with, in our environment, all scripts have to be signed. If we edit the code in the interface, would we be able to sign it? I think that's a no. That's probably when you'd want to offload it to the mid or use like a signed PowerShell script or something of that nature. But if there's
agreed. In that case, it would be kind of a tandem where presumably you distribute your scripts, you distribute it and sign them via some CI/CD process or config management tool. So that piece would continue to reside in that tool, and then you would just use the Flow engine to invoke the approved content.
David, if you have anything else on that, please feel free to follow up via email. We'll get you either in touch with the right people or give you some advice.
So now that my build's completed and my output is attached to my requested item, I call the get build information action, which reaches out to Jenkins, gets some more detail about that build. Specifically, was the build successful or did it fail? And then I enter into a exception handling piece of the flow where it tests for that build status information. So the build information includes a build status field, which I'm checking here, and I'm saying if it is not returning success, then we'll do a couple extra things. The first of which is to create a task. And then the second of which is to copy the attached console output from the requested item down into the task, so that in practice, a build engineer may not have visibility into that original request, or at the very least, they would have, if the attachment was not included on their task, they'd have to kind of navigate through the ServiceNow instance and find that parent request. So this is just a a quality of life type of step that puts everything, all the information that the fulfiller would need in the record that they are seeing in their queue. So it just goes into a for each loop for each of the attachments in case there were multiple attachments on the requested item, and then copies it over to the new task that it's created, which will be sent to build engineering to investigate the cause of the build failure. So now if I request a build on my Jenkins server, and then again leverage the flow context related link so I can kind of see what's going on in real time. So in this case, we can see that it went all the way down to kicking off the build via the perform build action. And now we're in our first iteration of the loop. It'll tell me when the next iteration is going to fire, which will be at 12:44 and 20 seconds Eastern time. I can see that my kind of dummy calls here that are kind of just some window dressing just to show a few of the other actions that are provided. Retrieving the Jenkins version shows me I'm at 2.303.2. And I've got a lengthy JSON payload, which includes an enumeration of all the builds that this example Jenkins box has ever done. If I look at my project on the Jenkins side, I can see right over here, build number 39 kicked off about a minute ago. And I can see from here that it succeeded. Let's see, hopefully the result I received from the ServiceNow side will match up with that. So the flow shows completed, and I can see that the build information that was retrieved showed success. And so just one other thing to point out about this flow was we include a healthy helping of built-in transforms that you can run when you're pulling data into a flow step. So for example, this if statement is checking the build status, and I didn't want to have to worry about, is it going to be lowercase, uppercase, mixed case, whatever. So by using this little function icon here, when I pulled in that particular piece of data, I said, you know what, let's convert it to lowercase. And so I applied just a simple lowercase transform, just dragging and dropping, didn't have to write any code, just put it in there. And they can be stacked. So if you've got something a little more complicated, you can stack whatever transforms you want to run on the data before you pass it through to your condition or whatever step you're feeding that data into.
Hey, Will, we have 15 more minutes. Do we have time for one more quick demo and then?
Yeah, this one's a quick one, so I'll kind of close out the demo phase with this one. I mentioned our agent client collector and how it streamlines any automation which needs to run commands or interrogate data from a remote system. So this example simulates a scenario where a problem, the dreaded ambiguous network issue has been reported on a server and you need the network team to investigate. Rather than have the network team tasked with manually collecting, the standard information that you need every time you debug one of these problems, I created a very brief flow, which again triggers off a catalog item, pulls the catalog variable with the server name, and then uses our built-in OS query ACC action to pull that information down via a standard OS query syntax. So the agent client collector includes a turnkey installation of OS query, which represents various aspects of the running system in a SQL style database. And so rather than have to remotely access the server, run a bunch of OS commands, in this case, I can just feed it a simple query, and that will be executed by the agent, returned back to my flow, which will then populate a catalog task for the network team saying, hey, please investigate this server. Here's some basic networking information that I retrieved for you to get you started. Okay, so now we can see that the flow has executed the get network statistics step and produced a nice JSON payload, and then it's created the catalog task. So then if I refresh my catalog task list down here, it'll show that there's a catalog task generated to assess server network performance, and then it's attached this copious networking information as a kind of a jump start for the tech. Okay, that concludes my segment. I'll hand it back over to Patrick to wrangle the Q&A.
All right, folks. So before you drop, I did put a quick poll up in the Zoom. So please answer it. We'll either send you a randomly selected person. We'll either get a DoorDash gift card or the option to donate to their charity of choice. So we'd really, appreciate your feedback on the webinar today. And then Q&A. If anyone wants to come off mute and be brave, please use the raise hand function, and I will take you off mute and you can ask your question live, or just use the Q&A function in the Zoom webinar. And if you are dropping and have to go to another meeting, or you're just dropping off, have a great day. We will we'll hang out for the next 10 minutes to answer any questions you may have. David, I put my email in a private message to you. So if you want to shoot me over the signing questions, we're happy to get them answered. David and Will, I think you answered everything that anyone would want to know about Integration Hub and Flow Designer, because not a lot of questions today.
Yeah, we need like background music or something.
Right. Oh, hold on.
There's a question.
All right, Erica, do you want to? I'm gonna take you off of mute. Let's try this.
All right. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. David, this may be for you. I think your first demo was creating an AD account in Azure. Today, I would say our organization isn't very good about deleting old accounts. So more often than not, we do have those duplicate accounts where we need to add like a second letter. Right now we do first initial last name. I think you said if there is a duplicate, it goes in for like an approval process. Is there not an option to add additional automation there?
So in the flow template, the way the existing primary account was handled was by actually closing the request. The demonstration I gave was one way to not just close the request. So we had John Steele and John Steele 2, and I don't know if you caught it, but I looped through, and it went through 3 times until it actually wrote the user. So John Steele and John Steele 2 already existed. When I found them, I iterated the number and got to John Steele 3, and that's why we saw that John Steele 3 was created. It can be a number. It could be add an extra letter of the last name. So different organizations handle that a little differently. So I handled it one way. It's all doable, whichever way you want to do that. And the other thing I would say, depending on the use case, there's also scope to delete a user account. So maybe part of your offboarding process then becomes a different flow. So those old users that are no longer there occupying John Steele 2 are actually no longer there, and you're able to reuse that if that works for your organization.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Erica.
There's a question in the Q&A. Patrick, can adding or removing from AD security groups or DLs be added to the service catalog using flows? The short answer is yes. And the longer answer is that's handled a little bit differently in Azure AD and on-premise AD. So depending which one you're doing, you can do either. You need to use the appropriate spoke, and those are both out-of-the-box actions as well to add to security groups and DLs on-prem.
Folks, we have 5 minutes left. If there aren't any more questions, we'll obviously give everyone a couple of minutes back. We'll hang out, for the next couple of minutes as long as it's quiet. If not, we'll go to 1 o'clock.
There's there's one about the Workday spoke. I don't know if you know that off the top of your head, Patrick. I was kind of looking.
Workday spoke.
Docs. Yeah. To use Workday spoke, does HR module need to be installed just to retrieve the user data?
I'm not sure about that one. David's shaking his head. Maybe.
Yeah, you won't need the HR module, but you will need the Workday spoke and the appropriate entitlement to the package that's included in. But you don't need any HR specific content other than just the integrationHub package to use the Workday spoke.
Will there be a way to update to allow DL updates in Azure AD? It exists with the on-prem, but not the Azure AD version. So we'll look into that for you, Ray. The other thing that you could do is definitely pose that on, David, what's the name of the site where we can provide feedback to ServiceNow and R&D?
The community, and then there's different ways to go from there.
Yeah.
There's a kind of a comment about making this demo available in the ServiceNow community.
What do you mean the demo? Like the availability for? I guess we need a little more there.
Possibly just the recording, maybe.
So everyone will be sent the recording, and then we will put. It'll be edited, so all the customer information won't be there. Anyone that spoke won't be on there, but it will go out on the ServiceNow community YouTube channel as well.
There's one. Do the integrations work on integrationHub Starter, or do I need the Pro? I could tell you that we showed a number of different integrations today. They were across a number of different packages, and the best way to determine that, there's some documentation on the site which you would need for each spoke, or contacting the account team would be another way, and they can provide that information.
Yeah, all the spokes that I demonstrated are enterprise. So at least those three that I did, they fall under enterprise.
Patrick, is the automation opportunities functionality included within ITSM Pro?
Yes, that's part of predictive intelligence. So if you have ITSM Pro, you should be able to use it. I'm not sure if it's release dependent though, but we can probably pretty quickly look.
And then, is there a way the full payload created from actions? Way to view.
Is there a way to view the full pay? Perhaps that's what they were asking, and the answer is yes. You just it clicks into a dialog. So when you're kind of developing or debugging, you can just click any payload that's been returned and see it represented in a pop-up, either raw text or formatted. If it's formattable, in this case, it's kind of raw JSON, so formatted doesn't seem to do anything.
Automation discovery, Paris or newer.
What type of security is used to protect the credentials for Azure AD or MSOL?
So it's the same credentialing mechanism that we use for things like, discovery or, automation. It's the same credentials table. So all of the same security principles apply. That said, if security is a concern, definitely look into the ACC because it kind of gets around that whole privileged credential issue. Obviously, that's not going to apply to things like Azure AD, but if you're trying to automate things against a server, Linux, Windows, it may be applicable to your use case.
And because all the spokes leverage our standard credential management mechanism, you can integrate with, privilege managers like CyberArk if there's a desire to store credentials external to ServiceNow, same as with all of our other facilities.
All right. Well, we are at the hour. Thank you so much to the people who are still on the phone for spending this time with us. If you have other questions, I think you'll get an email from the Zoom webinar, which actually have my email on it, I believe. So feel free. I may not be able to answer all of them. I can, get you in touch with the people that can, or even your ServiceNow account team. But thanks again. David, Will, thank you for the really, really informative demonstrations.